Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, I'm excited to introduce to you Lindsay Hadley. She is currently the Director of Client Relations at Capita Financial Network. Early in her career, she facilitated humanitarian projects around the world in developing countries. Since then, she has demonstrated her exceptional fundraising skills, raising more than $40 million directly for her clients, and has leveraged billions, yes, B, for causes through her campaigns and events. She has worked with people like Nelson Mandela and even done some events at the Vatican. Lindsay was selected as a winner in Utah Business Magazine in 2015 for 40 Under 40 awards, and she sits on numerous boards as a director or advisor. Lindsay was a visiting professor at BYU Hawaii, teaching social entrepreneurship, and lives on the North Shore of Oahu. She is the mother of 3 boys and the wife of a loving and supporting husband. She prizes family and personal relationships over everything else. And I need to say, Lindsay actually was my oldest daughter's professor when she was at BYU Hawaii, and absolutely adores Lindsay. So Lindsay, thank you for being part of our show today.
Oh, Jason, thank you so much for having me. I adore your daughter, Nikhil. She was one of my favorite students, and I'm just so grateful she connected us. So this is really fun to come on the show. Thanks for having me.
Great. So tell us a little bit about your journey. Talking before the show, we understand you were born in a rather small town in Utah, and raising to this level where you've helped raise billions of dollars for all kinds of different things, polio and eradicating polio and different things and stuff at the Vatican. That's amazing. Tell us a little bit about your journey from small town girl to worldwide influence.
Well, you're so sweet to let me speak. You know, I don't know about having worldwide influence, but some of the things I've been a part of definitely have, which is a neat thing, right? I definitely have taken a journey that is rather surprising and unexpected from my small town roots. I did grow up in a little tiny town and grew up in a very, LDS community, and I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My parents are very staunch LDS, and in the world around me, I didn't really have any women that had careers. I think I had one aunt who was a therapist, like a counselor. But for the most part, other than, supplementary incomes for maybe 1 or 2 aunts or people that maybe were struggling financially, all the women in my life were stay-at-home mothers. And so to end up becoming the primary breadwinner in my family and to have a career like I've had, it just kind of took me by surprise. I had no ambitions for this. It just put one foot in front of the other, and then basically felt like God led me into what I'm doing today. And it's not without its, heartbreaks and failures and losses. Anyone who tells a good story has. I mean, those are the best stories, are made of treacherous moments, right? And near-death experiences of all kind, emotionally, spiritually, and proverbially, and literally, you go on with life, and it's just a miracle that we get to wake up every day. But my story started out that I just was really passionate about philanthropy and charity work. And as a young woman, I went on humanitarian trips with local nonprofits out of Utah. And I said, man, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. So my purview, or my perspective of what I wanted to do, was just to volunteer. And so I married this darling Australian man named Jeff, and he moved over from Australia, and we began our families. And he was a stockbroker in his early career. In 2008, the market collapsed, and I found myself suddenly having this, supplemental income and working for an NGO at minimum wage, to suddenly having some necessity to bring in, significant financial security for my family. And I found that I had a real knack for fundraising and events. My early career, I started out doing humanitarian work in the field in third world countries, like building schools and medical dispensaries and hospitals and clean water, initiatives. And I was just very much boots on the ground. I ended up, trekking malaria-ridden jungles and working with people that had never seen white people before. And it was a really amazing experience and an incredible education. And then in 2008, I had my first son, who's now 15, Milo. And I suddenly didn't want to be traveling as extensively. I want to be home with these little nursing babies. And now I've had 3 sons. And I moved into more administration and fundraising roles in the nonprofit sector. And again, found that I had a knack for that, and just really relentless work ethic and I guess this optimism that had this audacity to believe things would work out if we tried, and ended up putting on music concerts. I love music and produced music festivals and concerts for charity, and then eventually started doing this at like a global level, and through a couple different experiences and campaigns ended up finding myself on this crazy trajectory, Jason, where I was essentially working with some of the world's most elite and influential people and high profile people, whether celebrities or billionaires, multinational corporations and NGOs, major religious world institutions, the United Nations. I mean, I found myself in kind of rooms that I just genuinely felt like imposter syndrome about, but next thing we know, I built a little boutique consultancy called Hadley Impact Consulting. And for 10 years, I helped some of these incredible people with their philanthropy and their charitable initiatives. And we saw some remarkable results and some very painful, sad failures, as we do as anyone trying something audacious and being at the edge of your capacity all the time. And learned a lot of beautiful things. And now, just 6 months ago, I had this plot career twist by getting invited by my friend to join Capita Financial Network, which has been just like a dream come true, and I'm having the time of my life. So I also on the side produce film and television shows and movies, and that's been just like a fun kind of a hobby that I do on the side that is brought a lot of joy to me. So that's a crazy story, but it's been really fun.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing. You mentioned as part of telling us that there's been some crash and burns and failures that have been painful. Share with us one of those experiences. I mean, we don't need to be super personal. However, we want to know a little bit about how you failed, and then what were the lessons that you gleaned from that coming out of that failure?
Oh, thanks for that question, Jason. I love talking about failure, and I'm known as like an oversharer. I feel like if you open the kimono, then you can be fully known and then chosen by the right people, So I feel I'm totally okay. There's literally nothing you can't ask me. I found in my early career, I put on a music concert, and we had a lot of success when I was in college. I was, a little bit younger than Nikhil, and I put on a benefit concert with, at the time, an artist called Ben Folds 5. This will date me, depending on the demographic of your listeners. But I put on this concert, and we raised $100,000 for clean water wells in Cambodia. And I ended up getting I was the Rotaract president, which was a Rotary International college, service club. And I ended up getting like a global award for it. And they flew me to Birmingham, England to receive it at the Rotary International Convention. And I remember thinking, well, that was really cool. Like, we raised apparently the most money of any Rotaract in the world from this one initiative. And that's why we got that recognition. And then I thought, and that was really fun. Everybody loves music. It feels good. It's a unifying thing. And I feel like it was really relatable and easy to get young people involved. And so I just decided to triple down on that and do more concerts. And eventually I tried a music festival in 2010 to raise money and awareness for a charity called Child Rescue that was combating human trafficking. And this was right after the movie Taken had come out. This is before a lot of well-known initiatives have now graced our zeitgeist of, the public understanding, the issue of human trafficking. And so we were early to this issue. I remember trying to talk to sponsors and people about it. They never heard of human trafficking. We would use the phrase like modern slavery, and they would be like, yeah, but that just happens overseas, right? And that just happens to very few people. They didn't realize it was happening pervasively in our own backyards through whether it was like illegal immigration and forced indentured servitude, or whether it was, sex trafficking, better known as prostitution, and people didn't really understand what they thought was and perceived as a victimless crime. So long story short, I put on this music festival, and it was the biggest thing I'd ever done. And I was really young. I had 2 young kids, and I killed myself and my team and volunteers. Like we did such Herculean effort to put this thing on. And we had artists like 311 and Third Eye Blind and Dashboard Confessional, again, dating how long ago this was. But it was this acoustic stripped down music festival. It was very cool. We ended up selling 5,000 tickets to this concert and like dismally failed because we needed 9,000 to break even. So it was at Thanksgiving point in Utah. And again, I'd never worked harder on anything. So I found myself literally that evening falling prostrate in the living room of my home. I felt like I hadn't seen my little children and my husband for 3 months. I was under tremendous stress when we saw the ticket sales were not, hitting their hoped intended for performance indicators, and just was so exhausted, and I felt like the biggest failure. And we had actually lost $100,000, not made money. So here's this other concert making 100,000, now this music festival losing 100,000, and these were sacred funds. People volunteered and trusted me. I was the leader. So when you're the leader, you get to be responsible when things go bad. And if you're a good leader, then when things go right, everyone else should get the credit, right? So it's one of these moments where I was sitting there on the ground just thinking, who am I to have tried this audacious thing? I'm from the small town. I'm nobody. I'm so mortified. And I had this like actually spiritual experience where I felt it wasn't audible, but it was definitely external to me. It was something metaphysical just said to me, this isn't about you. Pick yourself up and make things go right. And it was kind of this chastisement, but it was like a loving beckoning to betterment. I really realized like a lot of my sorrow and suffering was very self-focused. And I was just like, what are people going to think of me? And I'm the worst. And it was a lot of self-loathing that didn't actually serve anyone or the situation. So I went to bed at like 3 a.m. and the following morning I woke up and I remember thinking, how am I supposed to make things go right? Like, I know that's what God just told me to do, but I have no idea how, because I don't know what I even did wrong. I did what I did before on these concerts that were very successful. And I don't know why we failed so bad, especially with so much more of an effort. And so I ended up, Googling the most successful music festivals in the world. And of course, like Woodstock. And then for our generation, it was Coachella. And I then Googled who were the founders of Coachella, as I thought to myself, if I could just talk to one of those guys, maybe I could get 10 minutes of their time and get advice about what went wrong so I can do better. If you're going to ask anyone, let's ask the best, right? So I actually found the company that produced Coachella is a company called Golden Voice. And I saw that there were 2 main executive founders. One was a gentleman named Paul Tillett, who's in a lot of the forward-facing public, interviews. And he was kind of the face of the company, or the CEO, it seemed. And this other individual, Bill Fold was his name, just seemed more unassuming and like more in the background. And I often know those are the people that often get a lot of the operational things done, right? Like, and so I was like, he might know, he might be able to tell me, maybe he'd give me more of his time, he'd be more accessible. So I send this cold call email to some info at Golden Voice, and I shared my story and said that I epically failed. And I was this little stay-at-home mom that had like tried to do this concert, and I'm trying to help people, and I don't know what I did, and you're the best in the world. And you guys, he called me. I could do nothing for him. And Bill Fold, the Michael Jordan of what I was trying to do, called me. And, I was flabbergasted. And on the phone call, he encouraged me deeply and said, Lindsay, that's really impressive that your first year's music festival only lost $100,000. If you had known that 98% of all festivals lose money for the first 3 years, you could have built a runway, financial, mechanism to understand and tell your sponsors and investors this was the case. You actually have some real raw skills here. Why don't you fly down? I'm putting up Stagecoach. We just finished Coachella, and he was in the middle of putting on Stagecoach, which is like the country music festival version of Coachella, in Indio Valley. I got on the next flight with my husband. We went down and I met Bill Fold, who ended up becoming one of my mentors and heroes in my career. And you guys, I could do nothing for him. And in the end, he ended up giving me a bunch of advice about what I did wrong and what I did right, and encouragement, and just the idea that another human being would be like, you can do this, you can make up for this. I put on another event right after with his encouragement, not a music event, but a separate fundraising event where the chairman of Viacom, Sumner Redstone, a billionaire, attended and wrote a check for $1 million for the charity, wiping out the debt that the board members had covered for my last event, putting us well ahead in our fundraising. That was 3 months after. Following that incredible experience of raising this $1 million, 10 months into the incorporation of this little nonprofit that I was running, I moved to Australia, where I called Bill Fold and asked if he would like to help me put on a music festival. he said, that isn't for me, but let me get you the number one promoters, the music promoters. They're called Frontier Touring in Australia. And he put me on to Michael Gudinski and Michael Harrison, who were again, like legendary in the music industry in that country, and used his credibility to endorse me, in which they partnered with us. And I put on a music festival not even a year later from that event that was a quote failure financially, that ended up raising $118 million for polio eradication and changed the entire trajectory of my career. And after that, we were funded by Bill Gates, and we were, working with, Hugh Jackman and some of the world's biggest names. And we ended up producing Global Citizen in Central Park, which since has leveraged billions of dollars for the world's poor. And the funniest part is when we ended up doing the Central Park event the year after that, so 2 years after I cold called Bill Fold after that failed event, AEG and Bill Fold ended up partnering with us for the music festival in Central Park, which was a $7 million event. So you can imagine, here he was. So there's two amazing lessons in this. One, it's not about you when you fail. Pick yourself up and make things go right. Two, just what does it hurt to ask? Cold call, be vulnerable and ask. I mean, you could just get a no or non-response, but who knows what magic can come from the audacity of trying. And three, I could do nothing for Bill Fold, and yet 2 years later, he ended up being a part of an event that leveraged billions of dollars for the world's poor. And he pulled me backstage after that event that first year and introduced me to his closest friends and loved ones and said, Lindsay, I'm here because of you, and this is one of the most meaningful things in my career, so thank you. So here I was returning this amazing favor in his eyes when I could do nothing for him. So never assume what people can or can't do for you. Just, be good to other humans, and magic always happens. So those are some of the fun stories out of failure I love to share.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing those. I tell my kids all the time, the answer is always no until you ask. And you'll never get anything but a no until you ask, right? So it's
right.
Perfect that's right where you're at. You went out of your comfort zone and to ask and went to the top. I mean, I wouldn't, I guess in my situation, might think someone else second tier, third or fourth tier, versus you went to what in your words, the Michael Jordan of that industry. And I find it really interesting about what you do is there's a real tangible intrinsic value to what you do, right? It's not in dollars and cents, but yet what you said a minute ago, you've leveraged billions of dollars that's affected essentially more than 1 billion people, right? As a result of your interest. I just find that incredibly interesting. Talk a little bit about that intrinsic. I mean, you can't necessarily get really prideful of it, but tell us how that makes you feel.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. Pride would be, the wrong word qualitatively for sure, but there is a gratitude and a, I just, your chest your buttons burst with like this. I'm so glad I got to be a part of something like this. Like, it makes you feel like your life is meaningful and you did something. I think that the pride would come in the self-delusion that you think you did it on your own, because as I said, Bill Fold did not need to respond to a cold call email from some loser from, small town Utah who's like, I don't know what I'm doing, help, but he did. And, so many people like him helped along the way. And there was an entire team of people, whether it was, the board members that put up the money to let us to pay, move forward, that people that kept backing me when they saw that I failed and believed in me. It actually makes me emotional thinking about the incredible angels and people in my life that have helped me accomplish whatever I've accomplished. And I just know that we have to do it together. And in a beautiful way, one of my best friends says, we get to have to be together, So I think what I feel is the majesty of the power of the resilience of the human soul, and our capacity when we are unified and when we see ourselves in each other, and when we help and do things. I mean, everyone knows you need each other to get things done, but I just think if we really understood the extent of the miracles that can be accomplished when we work together in love and with the right intention. I mean, I've just seen so much good come out of it. And even things that quote fail they get redeemed. I think Bono said this once. We had the privilege of working with him, and he was lovely. And his daughter actually worked with us at Global Citizen, and is one of the founding members and chief development officer there, and executive producer of that for years. That incredible platform. I met a lot of people, but I remember we were backstage and Bono said something like, "The universe bends towards justice, like it bends towards love." And I really believe that. I think that's my genuine belief, is no matter how atrocious things can be, I guess it's a paradigm of how I see it, how I choose to see it, is like, where's the good, where's the beauty, and where's the light? And I just think it overpowers it, just the qualitative, palpable experience of goodness just outweighs the bad. So I've been amazed to be a part of things. But I'm also, I have to say this, and this sounds like, I don't know, something a Buddhist monk might say, and maybe I even heard it from one of them, but I really believe that changing the world, it actually changing one person's world, most specifically our own, is our own world, our own internal world, our view of humanity, our view of ourselves, the peace and love that can come from going in a really small and precious way, kind of trumps even changing the world at mass. I think that's how we actually change the world. They're almost like a paradox working in tandem. And it's like amazing. Like, some of the most rewarding and edifying moments of my entire life have been the most intimate, quiet exchanges where I've seen someone's life be better because of something I maybe was a part of, and so sometimes at scale you lose the interpersonal gravitas that can come from how powerful we really can be when we get used by love and by God, whatever you want to call it, by doing the right thing. And so, yeah, I think, it's a great question, and it's been a splendor to just to been privileged to be a part of those kinds of things.
Now, was it always your goal to set out to I'm going to help 1 billion people from day one, or did you have something else in mind and you had to grow into those shoes?
That's a great question. I did not have it in mind. As I said, I really had almost no ambition for any kind of a career. I remember when I asked my father once, I was studying in college, and I said, "What should I major?" And he said, "Doesn't matter. You're just going to be a mom." And that was literally like the paradigm I came from. There wasn't really anything outside of motherhood that for me. And so I didn't expect it. I did know this, that I loved helping people, that it felt good. It was, entirely selfish. It just made me feel good about myself and made my quality of life better. And people say that, and everyone knows it. Everybody knows it. You go do something, you give. It's so much better to give than receive. It's not like it's not like because it's noble. It just literally feels better to give than receive. It's a wonderful feeling to be in that position, and the privileges that I've been blessed with, being just by the lottery of life, being born and where I've been born with the people around me and the resources and the capacities and whatever it may be, just feels like the right thing. So I just kind of followed that good feeling. And, sometimes even along the way, like a lot of do-gooders, and I've been absolutely guilty of this, we get self-deluded along the way thinking this is doing good, when really we're just feeding our own egos or our own, vain ambitions or whatever. That gets mixed in with our humanity. I think anybody who isn't aware of that would scare me, because that's a big part of coming along, right? We can in our totality, we can have maybe self-aggrandizing and selfish desires and beautiful, pure, amazing desires at the same time. I think that's a part of being human, because we're wrestling with different aspects and all these different parts of what it means to be human, right? And because we have insecurities that drive some of it. The more that I can fight that off and be around, literally my hack has been just be around people way better than me and let them rub off on me. That's like my utter hack, like your daughter, Nikhil. I'm just like, can I hang with you? I want your purity and your unassuming, like, humble energy to just influence me every day. So that's been my hack for sure.
Awesome. How much would you say was due to you just being in the right place and time versus luck versus like your own skill?
That's a really great question. I have no way to answer that. I think that that's kind of like asking, what makes us who we are. Like it's the amalgamation of all those things, I don't know what equation. I do know that some people really way smarter than me have tried to research this. Tony Hsieh, who's the founder of a company I really love, who's passed away, and I had a chance of meeting and knowing. Tony Hsieh was the founder of Zappos. If anybody's ever read his book, Delivering Happiness, I highly recommend. It's a fabulous autobiography of his journey of building a multi-billion-dollar company, the largest internet acquisition at its time in history from Amazon. And he did a lot of research on like luck versus opportunity, versus preparedness. And there's some pretty interesting research that indicates that actually, and again, what makes people think this way or their wiring, I don't know. Is that luck, just genetics or situational, or like again, epigenetics? I don't really know, but there seems to be a paradigm, a way of being, a worldview that actually people that tend to see things a certain way end up becoming, quote, more lucky. They have a different paradigm. There was recent research that I read. He showed that over time they had the same amount of like missed opportunities or opportunities. They just did some longitudinal studies and major research, and they just found that people that found themselves to be lucky actually were just some people that were more, quote, optimistic, you know what I mean? And they were more opportunistic as well, and more brave, willing to fail, and had more humility in their process of failure. They didn't see it as an identity issue. They saw it as like, this is a part of my achievement, is I'm going to fail. And so it's interesting to look at that research, but there was recent research that showed that people that were lucky, and I wish I could cite this, this would be helpful. You maybe could Google it, but there was research where they had people that identified themselves as lucky versus people that identified themselves not lucky. And they gave them a task assignment. It was a study that was done by a psychologist, and they just had, or I think it was behavioral scientists, and they said, look in this newspaper and count all the pictures you can see in this periodical. And so what happened was the people who deemed themselves as lucky stopped within a few seconds and finished the task. And the people who didn't see themselves as lucky took on average 2 minutes longer than the lucky people to finish the task. And they found the reason why is on the second page, there actually was written, stop here. There was words written kind of cryptically, not too cryptically, but there were words that said, stop counting. There's 49 pictures. I'm making that number up, but it was like, it actually gave the answer on the second page of the newspaper. So the lucky people had a bigger purview or view. They saw differently. Their paradigm was different, and they saw the information and then finished faster. Isn't that interesting? And they saw that was a direct correlation with them viewing themselves as lucky. So it might be a mindset. And I don't know, I think you can change your mindset. I sure have, right? I've changed my thinking. I mean, really, Jesus taught about repentance is literally just in Hebrew, the idea to repent is to change your thought, to literally 180 degrees change your thinking. So I really think we can change our thinking. I absolutely believe that. So that's kind of cool. So maybe we can improve our luck by the way we see the world.
Well, that is one thing that all the thinkers throughout time have agreed on, that you can, what you think in your mind, it starts to manifest, right? You can become what you think about. It's sort of gravity comes before that, or goes to that. Let's assume for a minute that there's a listener, okay, and they aspire to be a philanthropy person, someone that raises money for charities, that helps out, kind of like your career. What are some steps that you would recommend that they take to do something similar that you have done? Or
I'm going to refine that a little bit further. Let's not limit it just to that. Let's just say someone who wants to play a bigger game, because all of our listeners can relate to that.
Okay. Yeah, that's so great. Well, to maybe start, like, I absolutely am the biggest believer in create value first. So give before you get. I think that a lot of young people, because I have quote unquote a sexy career, because I work with celebrities and they're music heroes and famous people, and they're like, that's so cool. And I'm doing charity, and I travel the world, and things that really are appealing to a lot of millennials and Gen Zers and people in general. They're like, wow, that sounds so fun. And by the way, it doesn't all come without a cost, right? All these things that seem shiny have their downside. Everything has the other side of its coin. It's a good conversation to have. But basically, they'll be like, hey, I want to do what you do. Can you show me? And they lead with just this, like, can I get something for you? And I'll tell them myself, I met once with an amazingly high-powered lawyer from the music industry. He was Michael Jackson's lawyer and Prince's lawyer and Lady Gaga's lawyer. And the lawyers in the music industry really made people's careers. They're definitively impactful in trajectory of the careers of some of the most famous people in the world, because the deals they negotiate and how they manage their careers. And I met with him and I had this chance to be with him. He gave me his time so generously. And I remember asking kind of a similar question of like, but it was more, again, parochial and self-focused. I was like, what advice can you give me for how I can, accomplish more in my career? And he goes, don't ask questions like that. Ask how you can help me. And he was literally like, you're with somebody who's in this, like, proverbial food chain way higher than you. You're in a meritocracy and you're like, help me. What can I get? That's just the wrong posture. It was really humbling and amazing and impactful and stayed with me, right? That was in my mid-20s when I had that conversation. And I just think, give first, like, be willing to be like, I will shine your shoes. What can I do for you? How can I help you? What, and give recklessly, help people without any strings attached, and just believe that you can obviously over time see people that are users, people that are, abusive in your generosity, and you can create boundaries. But I generally think the right posture, at least that has helped me in life, and I've watched a lot of other people, is to have this kind of abundance mentality and believe that in long-term accounting of relationship, and just be like, how can I help you? And how can I give? And what can I do? And sometimes we do have to get transactional and find a way that can help us. But again, Bill Fold could never have known when he called me and responded to my email that I could later give him a $7 million contract that would lead to leveraging billions of dollars and be like a very powerful thing for his career and business and for his life, right? He'd never have known that. So I've had amazing experiences where I've been in a taxi cab and talking to the taxi cab driver and befriending him because I don't make assumptions of what he can or can't do for me. He's just an amazing human being that I'm connecting with in that moment. And next thing I know, I find out he's interning as a CPA at the Ford Foundation, which leads to a $100,000 donation for one of my clients, right? So the idea of just like dismissing people and deciding who can get you places, that people are vehicles and I can get somewhere. I say, if you're going to have that thinking, which is technically kind of true, we can all potentially, help each other or hinder each other. Have the view that you don't know, that you may never know. But if you go into situations where you clearly know someone has resources or expertise or relationships or assets that you need to accomplish your goals, figure out how to help them. Don't ask them to get behind you, get behind them, and you can accomplish kind of anything. So as a young person, interning, volunteering, asking a lot of questions, leveraging value for power connections in your network, like figuring out what they're trying to accomplish, and they say, well, man, they're trying to get more investors for their amazing business. I know a couple high net worth people that probably they would benefit from knowing each other. Let me broker a lunch deal, And if you don't mind, I'll give you a really trite example of something that in college kind of illustrates this thinking that I really believe in and why it worked. Because I think a lot of times when people are like, well, yeah, great, you leveraged knowing Nelson Mandela's grandson to then be able to get, Whoopi Goldberg involved, whatever, like through my friend Freddie who helped, like this idea of like leveraging these big names, and people are like, that doesn't sound very realistic for me. Like if I give you these kind of top level, really impactful stories, they might feel out of reach. But as a college student, I was really poor. And like most college students living on top ramen and 90-cent frozen burritos. And I lived right down the street from this amazing pizza place in Southern California called OC Pizza. And a couple blocks down was an amazing Mexican place, little hole in wall Mexican place called Alejandro's. And, they were $7 a meal kind of thing, or $10 a meal. And I just didn't have that kind of money as a poor college student. But I, every now and then, would save up enough to like treat myself and my roommates, and we'd go in on a pie and go get a pizza, right? And I befriended the workers, and it occurred to me, they must be sick of eating pizza. The same guys work here every day, day in and out, 20 or 40 hours a week. And they eat the free food that their employers provide on their shifts. They got to be sick of eating pizza and the same food. It occurred to me thinking about them and their lives and what they're trying to accomplish. And I thought the Mexican guys probably have the same problem. And so I had a conversation with both parties. I just said, hey, you must be sick of eating pizza. Would you like some Mexican? Hey, would you like some pizza? You must be sick of eating Mexican. And they both were delighted at my offer. And I brokered the two meals and passed their meals that the employees would have got there. And guess who got to eat for free at both places for an entire year? Every time I walked in, whether I brought in a date or friends, they were like, Lindsay, it's on us, So, just by creating that value, so something that's simple, that trite, just seeing how can I be of service? And I think that is what I would say. I think a lot of people, it's crazy how dumb smart that is, or how obvious, or I guess common sense that isn't common practice. Just be like a radically valuable person to everyone else. And I think good things come out of that.
Wow, there's been so much good and great stuff that you've shared. We feel like that we've been benefited here, and sure appreciate your time and your willingness to come on the podcast. In the event someone wanted to follow you or get involved with something you're involved with, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Oh my gosh, thank you for asking that. Yeah, you can find me on, you guys feel free to email me. My new email is Lindsay, Lindsay at Capita, CAPITA mail.com. And like Phil Fold, I'll return your email. It might take me a minute because I get lots of emails, but I'd love to get back to anybody and talk with them and figure out how we can work together. It's interesting because my new job, I no longer am doing consulting in the nonprofit space, but I do sit on a couple boards, and I advise one family office, and I work with them in doing humanitarian work overseas. But for the most part, my focus is helping bring new high net worth relationships to Capita as we grow our assets under management. And they let me use the company budget and the company jet and all these amazing things to create value for other people. And I do a lot in the philanthropic space with the blessing of and generosity of Capita. They let me use the resources we would otherwise spend on marketing to get behind amazing causes. So I'm able to take the 10 years of that network and benefit. And then we get to do fun things with potential clients that bring a lot of purpose. Like, for example, this month in July, or I guess coming up here in a few weeks, I'm taking a group of 13, potential Capita clients and others to Africa. And we're doing, like, I guess, a trip and learning ways to be impactful in the country of Eswatini, north of South Africa. And Capita is so generously like underwriting these experiences, and the Fox River Foundation that I work with. And it's really cool because, again, we're just going to build relationship with these people that are high net worth people and that are doing great things in the world. And we just believe long term, if they need someone to manage their money, like, we do an excellent job, and these things come back to us, and it's been paying off. So the last 6 months, we've been doing all kinds of things. So if anybody wants to reach out to me about that kind of thing, amazing. But also, yeah, if you have causes that you really believe in, or ideas that you have that are pretty magical, I'd be happy to see if there's a way I can help. But thank you guys for having me on. What a joy.
Yeah, we'll put that down in the show notes, everyone that's been listening. And just another sort of parenthetical statement. We talked earlier that you said you didn't know much about the infinite banking concept. Listening to what you're talking about, I believe I have a way to help charities, the donor to donate to a charity, right? Mm-hmm. And do it in a way that they can actually increase their wealth by how they do the donation. I know that doesn't make sense, but I'd like to run past you sometime to see, because I think it would be powerful. Because then people could say, oh yeah, I gave them 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures to this, but in the process, they could actually increase the family's wealth by doing so. Anyway, that's here nor there. We don't want to do that here.
I love that.
Real quick, we're running out of time. Tell us, Lindsay, we're basically giving you an opportunity to put it out the universe. Where's Lindsay going to be in 5 years? And then we also want a commitment from you that when you get there, you'll come back on the show.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, well, that's fun, Jason. Okay, so I'd absolutely come back on the show. Thanks for having me again. In 5 years, I hope to, I travel back and forth to Utah and the North Shore. I love it. It's paradise here. And I would love to we have some land that we want to develop here in Hawaii. And my dream would be to have a beautiful home here in Hawaii that I can host these retreats and people, and have people like you guys come and hang and to kill anytime. And then a home in Utah too. Right now I travel back and forth and stay and our dear friends' places, but I'd love to have, two homes so I can go back and forth and enjoy the beauty and the power of both of those and share that with so many people, which is my favorite thing to do, is host and share what we got. And so that would be amazing. I'd love to be still doing a lot of philanthropy at scale and the things that we're doing, whether through Capita or other partners. And I do make film, and I'm currently I'd love to be having, more films. Maybe you can see me on the red carpet one of these days. That'd be kind of cool in the next 5 years. Maybe we could get, recognized by our peers for some of the film and content that we're making. But I would say the biggest thing I hope is that that my mental health as well, that my spirit as well, that I'm able to that I've got beautiful relationships with my family, and that I've got amazing people in my life like I do now, and that I've taken good care of them, and that I hope that I'm just able to give people at a higher capacity. That would be really cool. It's just increase our capacity to help. That would be a real blessing. But if there's any way I can keep looking at these sunsets here on the North Shore, that would be really awesome.
So June 27, 2028, and about 4:00, we'll come and we want to do a podcast at the house.
I love it.
So that your family can be involved. We'll have Nicole come.
Yes.
We'll be able to celebrate this milestone.
Yes. So much yes to that. That's amazing. I love it, Scott. You guys are incredible. Thank you for having me on. This has been such a joy. What a fun idea to ask your guests that question.
Well, thank you. We look forward to your success.
Thank you,
Jason,
guys.
any final words?
No, I'm excited for 2028 when we go to Hawaii and hang out with Lindsay for a few days.
Yeah.
Amen to that. Well, thanks guys for tuning in. We will catch you here next time.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.